he wakes up with a fever and complaining of a horrible headache. He started having these hallucinations and these screaming terror fits. And he would just scream.
He started coughing a lot and we saw blood.
The convulsions and the seizures kept happening.
There was a point in which the doctor said, "What am I missing? What's happening here?"
The room filled with doctors. They instantly put her on life support.
I was shocked, speechless, because this was literally a death sentence.
Hello, and welcome to Something's Killing Me. I'm B.D. Wong. As parents, we spend our lives trying to protect our children, doing our best to keep them out of harm's way. But what if even the best of efforts is not enough? We begin our story with a young Texas family whose lives were turned upside down when their 7-year-old was stricken with a mysterious illness.
Okay, I have to give the phone to my mom, so I'll make videos after when she gives it back. Bye! Peace, homie!
In 2010, a week before school started, we made the decision that we were going to take our camper to a river here in Texas, and then we would spend some time at my mom and dad's house on Lake Granbury.
We had a good time with cousins and grandparents and spent the weekends at their house and the weekdays at the river.
I remember sitting outside talking to Julie and commenting on, this is probably the best vacation we've ever had together.
We got home Sunday after the vacation. Kyle had 3 days of school and played his scrimmage baseball game Wednesday night.
It was without a doubt the best game he had ever played in his life. And I actually told my son at 7 years old, "You're already better than I ever was. I don't know what else to tell you other than just go have fun."
Thursday morning, he wakes me up about 5:30 in the morning with a fever and complaining of a horrible headache. So we laid him back down. And I laid with him for a while, and Kyle had thrown up a little bit after lunch, and that evening the fever was still there. And then when he threw up again, our friend who was the doctor said, "Take him in, get him checked out." So Kyle and I went to Cook's, and I remember sitting there in the emergency room, and for the first time I saw just this dazed look on his face, sitting in the wheelchair waiting. And when they got us back to the room, they secluded us because at that time they were thinking he might have some sort of meningitis.
And people have heard this term meningitis, and what that basically means is that the outer layers of your brain, what are called the meninges, have now become inflamed.
Thursday night, they did a spinal tap on him.
With the spinal tap or a lumbar puncture, they're basically the same thing. You're trying to get into a area of the body that houses this fluid called cerebral spinal fluid. It's fluid that's constantly circulating around the brain, then around the spinal cord, and is kind of providing this nourishment to your central nervous system. You can take some of that fluid out, look at it under the microscope, and see if you see anything abnormal.
They really couldn't confirm anything, but they were leaning more towards the bacterial meningitis. And you're talking Thursday night, and now we're into Friday, and we still don't know what's going on. It wasn't anything that seemed super serious.
Saturday morning, he woke up and he was good to go. I think that's when the doctor came in and said, he can go home. It's some sort of meningitis. It will run its course. And then I start noticing him almost looking like he's sleeping with his eyes open. When he was sitting up, the noises were just frightening to him. The light really hurt his eyes. I had the nurse look over him, and she got kind of startled. Told the doctor they weren't real sure what or why, probably just part of the meningitis, but it got worse.
Kyle Lewis's unusual symptoms are disturbing, but it's not an isolated case. The parents of a 12-year-old girl in Arkansas are faced with a similar medical mystery. Their daughter, Kaylee Hardig, an active, healthy middle schooler, is suddenly showing signs of the same mysterious illness.
Kaylee always likes to give and take care of other people. She has a big heart.
She's a very active girl, just love to be outside, do things.
She goes to a water park. And after her visit to the water park, she starts to feel sick.
I was at work, and I get a call from my wife and says, Kaylee's really sick, and she's bad sick.
The way Kaylee was acting, wanting to sleep longer than normal, not wanting to wake up, complaining with her head hurting so bad. And then when the vomiting started, it was like she could almost choke because she was just not awake enough or lethargic, you know, so that's what made me think it wasn't normal Kaylee just running a fever and being sick.
Kaylee was brought into the emergency department with headache and fever and just not acting right, being really sleepy, and her mother just knew something wasn't right.
And Tracy, Kaylee's mom, did a very good job of articulating her concerns about how her daughter was doing and helped the physicians recognize that she was sick, even though she didn't look that sick at that time.
Tracy Hardig, Kaylee's mother, she herself had been battling breast cancer. She knew that you can't be a passive patient, that sometimes you needed to push things a little bit. You needed to question things.
The doctor, he's kind of thinking maybe bacterial meningitis. And he said the only way we can actually eliminate this is to do a lumbar puncture. I said, that's the only way? He goes, that's the only way. I said, do it.
I hung on by my husband and asking him, what are we gonna do? And he would tell me that we're gonna pray for Kaylee.
He started having these hallucinations and these screaming terror fits. And he would just scream and then all of a sudden say, oh, Mommy, did you hear that?
Doctors believe Kaylee Hardig has meningitis and perform a spinal tap to confirm. Kyle Lewis's parents remain in the hospital because their son's condition has deteriorated.
He started having these hallucinations and these screaming terror fits. And he would just scream and then all of a sudden say, Mommy, did you hear that? And that just broke my heart. And that's when Dr. Marks came in and decided to take Kyle to the MRI. And at this point, I couldn't even hold Kyle because he was kind of uncontrollable. So Jeremy got on the stretcher with him and he had his MRI.
But nobody really had any clear idea of what was going on. They didn't have any better answers. The convulsions and the seizures kept happening. Saturday afternoon sometime, they told us that they're still leaning towards bacterial meningitis, which is deadly, but it can be beat. But there was something else. It was extremely fatal. If you got it, you very, very slim chance of making it through. They moved him to the intensive care, and we had to make the decision to basically induce a coma so that his body could take whatever medicine or whatever the protocol was going to be. It could take it a lot easier. I can remember being beside him, just telling him how much we love him and trying to communicate with him, and he looked up, and it was kind of ugh. We couldn't tell what he was saying, and he just kept repeating it. I finally knelt down to him, and I said, "Son, what are you trying to say?" And it came out clear, and he said, "Hug." And so Julie and I got to hug him, and at that point, they induced his coma.
We stayed in the room with him all night, and they were working on him and staying by his side. And I remember sitting in a chair all night, holding his little hand, praying for him. I got up and I went and laid down right at the head of his bed. 5:30 is when all the doctors came in, and he had lost brain activity. Oh.
Now the lines were just flat. And I looked at the doctor and I said, does that mean what I think it means? They told us that Kyle was gone. Machines are keeping him alive. So we made the decision that it was time to let him go home. God was calling him home. And they took him off of life support. And Julie and I were sitting in chairs, and they laid him on our lap. And we got to watch him go.
We thought it was meningitis.
Just 4 days after his initial symptoms, Kyle Lewis is gone. His heartbroken family struggled to understand how their healthy little boy could become so sick so quickly. And back in Little Rock, Arkansas, the parents of Kaylee Hardig are worried and about to find out the very disturbing results of her spinal tap.
I first heard about Kaylee's case because I was in the laboratory that night when someone told me that we had a hot spinal fluid, which means that's just lab lingo for one that looks really bad infected.
The fluid clearly looked like there was meningitis. There was a lot of white cells and protein, things that aren't normally in the spinal fluid.
And the minute I looked at it under the microscope, I saw the organism that trained people will recognize as an amoeba. My first thought when I saw this amoeba is, this child is going to die. Yeah, that's the first thing I thought, because it's always been a death sentence.
We just couldn't believe that we were going to lose Kaylee, but we decided that we weren't going to accept that, and hopefully our daughter would beat the odds.
Doctors have identified an amoeba as the possible reason for Kaylee Hardig's rapid decline. And following Kyle Lewis's death, his doctors come to a similar terrifying conclusion.
We thought it was meningitis in our case, but it wasn't until a couple hours after he passed away that they confirmed that it was the amoeba that took his life.
Naegleria fowleri is a type of amoeba that we hear about during the summer because this is when it typically grows and can cause a condition that is known as primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, also known as brain-eating disease.
It's a parasite. It's a small little parasite. This amoeba, this little tiny organism, will get into the sinuses and eventually start to make its way from the base of the brain all the way back to the brainstem area. So you can imagine this little amoeba sort of starting to crawl, literally, devouring some of the tissue as it goes along, using that brain tissue as a fuel source, and making its way further and further back into the brain. So the brain mounts a full-on response, a full-on inflammatory response, sending all these cells to basically now try and kill this amoeba. But that causes a lot of inflammation.
That inflammation results in swelling in the brain that leads to elevated pressures in the brain, and that ultimately pushes the brain down through the skull. and that is ultimately what usually causes death.
I always told my kids that Daddy will protect you. There's nothing in this world Daddy can't protect you from. We found out there was one.
Kyle Lewis's parents started a foundation in his name called Kyle Cares, spreading awareness about this deadly brain-eating amoeba. Tracy Hardig contacted the foundation, desperately looking for information, fearing that the amoeba was now killing her daughter.
Kaylee's mom and I, Tracy, started messaging through Facebook while Kaylee was in the hospital. She's a very strong, wonderful mother looking out for her daughter.
We just couldn't believe that we were going to lose Kaylee, but we decided that we weren't going to accept that, and we were going to start praying, and hopefully our daughter would beat the odds.
When we knew that Kaylee had an amoebic infection, the very next thing going through my mind is, okay, what are we going to do to treat this to make it better? This is a pretty rare infection.
When Dr. Lyman realized what was going on, he called the Centers for Disease Control and said, we need to come up with a plan.
With some assistance from them, we started working with this anti-parasitic medication called miltefosine.
Miltefosine is a breast cancer drug, and at the time that Kaylee got sick, there was some thought that it might be useful to help stop this brain-eating amoeba.
Basically, it can affect the cell wall of the amoeba, thereby killing it.
When Kaylee's case came in, when we got that call, we had literally just gotten the drug supply at CDC in Atlanta, and so she was our first opportunity to try it out.
She's on the antibacterial medicine, the antifungal medicine, and we also started her on the miltefosine as well. At that point, the severity of the infection is starting to stare us right in the face. The swelling in her brain had gotten severe enough that she actually started having trouble breathing, and they had to intubate her. And that's when she really became seriously ill.
Kaylee started to go unresponsive. The room filled with everybody, all the doctors, they instantly put her on life support.
After that Monday afternoon, when we had to put her on the ventilator and start doing a number of interventions to try to control her brain swelling, one of the things they did was cooling her body down to somewhere between 32 and 34 degrees Celsius, so quite a bit below normal body temperature to try to help control that brain swelling.
So they lower her body temperature to relax her brain. She felt like an ice cube. Your child is non-responsive anymore. She's on life support. We're in uncharted waters now.
Taking care of Kaylee was really challenging. It was a moment-to-moment roller coaster. We were periodically testing her spinal fluid to look for signs of improvement.
After we passed that 5 days, and then we hit 7 days, and then 10 days, and the organism was diminishing in number as we looked at it on the slides, we started to become hopeful.
Those positive signs begin to become more and more frequent. Those just continue to build this sort of hope in all of us. She might actually survive this.
Everything was slow, but everything fell into place. She's getting better. She's getting stronger. That's when you could breathe a little better.
I remember that he would tell me, "Mom, can you please take my brain out because I feel like it's going to explode."
After weeks of aggressive treatment, doctors see no trace of the amoeba. But 12-year-old Kaylee Hardig still has a long way to go. And so many questions remain. How and why do people get infected with this amoeba? And what do they all have in common? The mother of Sebastian De Leon, a young patient in a Florida hospital, also suffering from severe headaches, is about to find out.
The doctors asked what was happening with him. He said, I have a splitting headache. I can't look at the light.
I remember that he would tell me, Mom, can you please take my brain out because I feel like it's going to explode.
I told them this could simply be a migraine headache and photophobia, which is the light bothering your eyes, but it also could be meningitis. And I suggested that we go ahead and perform a spinal tap.
Under the microscope, I looked at cerebral spinal fluid that we had received from the emergency room. I did the cell count, and I found the white count was a little bit elevated, but nothing grossly abnormal to alarm me. But then when I went to document what I found, I noticed that this was a 16-year-old male in the emergency room with a headache, and something kicked in. I needed to go back and examine this closely. The first thing I focused on, I looked at, and I saw movement. I called my 2 coworkers and I said, you've got to confirm this because I think we have an amoeba. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as soon as I saw it, and I called Dr. Hernandez in the emergency room.
Her voice was somewhat trembling because she was quite sure that she was looking at amoeba. I was shocked, speechless. I couldn't believe what she was saying.
But how do you get this killer amoeba, and where is it found?
This brain-eating amoeba loves warm water. Warm, fresh water, like lakes and rivers.
A lot of times it's found deeper in the soil, but that soil can be sort of stirred up and then it's spread throughout those bodies of water.
What happens, you have the amoeba present in most warm water across the United States. You have people participating in recreational water activities, whether that's just swimming, also water skiing, wakeboarding, those activities that might allow for more water to go up the nose.
It's not a problem if it gets on your skin. It's not even a problem if you drink it. It is a problem if it goes up your nose, because if it goes up your nose, there's a pathway that will allow it to get to your brain.
Dr. Hernandez came in and he said, has your son been in any body of water? And then I recalled, well, he's been in camp and he's been going into this pond with other kids.
I told them that the Sebastian was suffering from a condition we call primary amoebic meningoencephalitis, also known as brain-eating disease. I told them that we had to act very quickly and to try to start treatment immediately, that we could not wait.
And he said, we're taking him to the ICU immediately. That's when everything went blank for me.
I requested an immediate call with our pediatric critical care physician, Dr. Umberto Liriano, because if we were dealing with amoeba in the spinal fluid, every second counted.
While Sebastian De Leon is in an Orlando hospital diagnosed with the brain-eating amoeba Naegleria fowleri, his doctor knows all too well what the amoeba can do because of a young patient 2 years before.
When I heard from Dr. Hernandez that Sebastian had this, it was a very haunting feeling. I thought of Jordan Smelsky, who was another patient of mine 2 years prior.
Jordan was 11 and a half on that last trip in Costa Rica.
I was set to go to the spa, so Jordan and Steve were going to hang out together for a few hours.
I said, what if we go in the pool that's got the water slide? He goes, all right, because it was filled with hot spring water. It was about 96 degrees. They went ahead and did a lumbar puncture, and he was diagnosed with viral meningitis.
Jordan's vitals started going all over the place, and things things just kept getting worse and worse. And it was clear that they didn't know why.
They were concerned about the intracranial pressure. And so they brought in a neurosurgeon. He drilled a little drain on top. And then when they took the CSF fluid out, that's in that sample is when they found the amoeba.
Jordan Smelsky is infected with the same brain-eating amoeba that killed Kyle Lewis. The experimental drug, miltefosine, that helped save Kaylee Hardig is at the CDC in Atlanta, more than 400 miles away. Will it get to Jordan in time?
They ordered miltefosine from the CDC, and it was on a flight. It wasn't there yet. And then I think we got 2 hours sleep. The doctor woke us up at 6 and said, his vitals are down so low, we've got no way to keep him alive. There's no way to wait until the drug gets here.
And he told us that Jordan's brain activity was about a 3, which meant that he was brain dead. I just remember looking at him and feeling like this can't really be happening.
His brain swelled and irradiated. I mean, it was just too quick,
He passed away at 6:35, just about 7 days and 12 hours after swimming. That's how fast it hits. By the time you get him to the hospital, you're already in trouble and you don't even know it. The drug, miltefosine, it arrived in Orlando 2 hours after Jordan had passed away.
I told him, "Are you a believer?" And he said, "Yes, I believe." And I said, "Well, let me tell you that I proclaim now that my God is going to save my son."
If the drug was ever going to work, we knew that it had to get there as quickly as possible. I believe minutes and hours matter.
With Jordan Smelsky's passing, his parents, like Kyle Lewis's parents, will not let his memory die. They set up the Jordan Smelsky Foundation and partner with the Florida Hospital for Children to hold amoeba summits, educating the medical community and warning parents about the dangers that lie beneath the surface of the water. But can their efforts help Sebastian De Leon, who is being treated at the same hospital by the same doctor who tried to save Jordan 2 years before?
It was very haunting, very haunting. But I knew that I had to do the best I can. I called a CDC, which is the first thing you have to do to report that we might have PAM, which is primary amoebic encephalitis, the brain-eating amoeba.
We consulted on Sebastian's case. We talked about pretty much following Kaylee's protocol for him, following everything that was done, everything that went right in her case.
We started to prepare Sebastian to transfer him to the pediatric intensive care unit so that further treatment could be instituted, including the possibility of a new experimental and promising drug.
Sebastian's doctors think the drug miltefosine is only in the hands of the CDC in Atlanta, but when they call, they find out the company that manufactures the drug is in Orlando, 30 minutes from the hospital.
When I first got the call from the Florida Hospital for Children about a potential patient that required the drug, miltefosine, I immediately called my son.
My dad, in a panicked voice, said, "There's a PAM case." He said it was in Orlando. Could I drive it? I immediately just picked up my keys and started going for my car.
If the drug was ever going to work, we knew that it had to get there as quickly as possible. I believe minutes and hours matter.
I was really panicked. He's giving me the details as I was driving to the office to get this drug. And literally just grabbed the drug from our drug locker, and the hospital was about another 15 minutes away.
He drove to the front entrance of the children's hospital, and then I sent one of my nurses down to get the medicine.
He said, "Here you go, take it." She turned around and went into the building.
He quickly explained to me that they were going to lower his body temperature and that they were going to administer a lot of antibiotics and antifungal and other medicine.
In my mind, if I cooled him, I was able to slow down the swelling of his brain and then change the form of the amoeba. The amoeba protects itself into a cyst in order to not die. And the cyst form, it doesn't eat the brain.
I remember that he said, "Tell him whatever you need to tell him now because we don't know if he's gonna wake up."
I know he's strong, and I'm gonna pray. I'm gonna talk to my family. I'm gonna talk to everybody that we know. We're gonna pray for Sebastian.
I asked Dr. Liriano, "Talk to me straight. Is he gonna die? Is there a risk that my son is going to die?" And he said, "Yes."
Sebastian De Leon is being attacked by a brain-eating amoeba that is 98% fatal. His doctors have put him in a medically induced coma and administer a cocktail of drugs similar to those given to survivor Kaylee Hardig. But will Sebastian also survive?
Now it's a waiting game. I don't know what to expect, but I think it might work. We'll keep watching it. At the same time, we're going to send the samples of cerebrospinal fluid to the CDC.
We were doing the confirmatory testing with a test that detects the amoeba DNA in the spinal fluid to see how quickly that the amoeba was being destroyed.
Every day, we would send the samples of cerebrospinal fluid to the CDC. And every day, they kept on telling us it was positive for the amoeba.
It was like the third day in the coma. He started coughing a lot and we saw blood and he was having a pulmonary edema. We decided we're gonna call a priest. I wanted him to go to heaven. I knew he was gonna go to heaven if we was gonna pass. So what we did, we just asked for a priest. Can somebody get us a priest so he could have his last rites? Because Catholics, as we are, we prepare for death. This is what we do. We kept praying every hour, every second that we could.
On the fourth day, Jennifer Cope came back to us and says, "This day is negative. It's completely negative."
We don't see the amoeba anymore.
And I said, "Is that a negative, or there's a possibility of going back?" And then they would say, "No, when it's negative, it's negative."
So that's when I knew for sure that the amoeba, it's dead and it's just wiped out and out of his system.
I remember one of the other doctors telling me, "So let's just not get our hopes up because we don't know when he wakes up how he's gonna be."
The amoeba that was infecting Sebastian De Leon is gone. Now, doctors begin the process of bringing him out of the coma by raising his body temperature.
After the temperature was coming up, he was more rosy. He looked like Sebastian again.
We took the tube out of his mouth. We were all so excited. We were overwhelmed at the fact that he was conscious enough to know that he could breathe.
We were so happy.
We hugged, we cried. Everybody that was on the floor cried.
And there I knew that we had beat this thing. We saved the child.
There have been 143 cases reported in the United States since 1962 when we started tracking. And in that time period, there have been only 4 survivors. We've documented a total of time from being exposed to the water with the amoeba to death of 10 days.
Every minute counts when you're fighting this amoeba because it's continually dividing and eating inside your brain.
This is strictly a freshwater amoeba. It's not in ocean water. Hundreds of millions of people participate in activities in those bodies of water every summer, and yet we only have a handful of cases every summer. I think, to me, that's the biggest mystery.
In the normal environment, it eats bacteria, so we don't even know why it attacks brain cells once it gets inside of a human host. Normally, in a lake, it'll live in the soil, float up to the top, eat the bacteria on top of the water, and then go back down. And that's when you come into contact with it, jumping into the water and having going up the nose.
I think it's important to take precautions. So if you can wear a nose plug, wear a nose plug. Don't jump into water without plugging your nose.
That one swim wasn't worth my child's life, and I just wish others would take the precautions necessary.
After he woke up, the doctor told him, now, this is like a baby now. He needs to start to walking, he needs to start eat, he needs to start speak again.
My name is Sebastian De Leon, and I survived the brain-eating amoeba. First thing that I heard when I came out was like, you know, you're a miracle and all that. I kept hearing those words over and over and over, and like God wants you here for a reason. I remember the first day I got home, that's when it all hit, and like I kind of like processed it all, and that's when like I kind of just like broke down a little bit, and I just started crying. And this is something that you need to talk about with someone that has been through what you've been through. And Kaylee Hardig is one of the only ones that's actually still out there that I know of.
Kaylee survived, and that's, you know, fantastic in and of itself. But just the story of how everything happened just never ceases to amaze me. She had this long road. She was in the hospital learning how to swallow and eat and talk. She was in the hospital for a total of 55 days.
At the time that Kaylee got sick, this brain-eating amoeba was basically a death sentence. Almost no one had ever survived it.
It's like God reached out and helped.
My name's Kaylee Hardig, and I survived a brain-eating amoeba.
Kaylee was only the third person known to survive this brain-eating amoeba in the United States.
It's truly amazing to be the third survivor.
She's doing pretty much awesome. She's got her driver's license. She drives everywhere. She doing great in school. Normal teenager.
I'm planning to go to college to be a physical therapist because I would love to work with kids that may have gone through what I have.
The Lewises and the Smelskys are amazing families that I've had the pleasure to work with. They have taken their tragedies of their children dying from this infection and made it their mission to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The Smelskys, they're like a second family to me now. I'm eternally grateful for them because if it wasn't for them, then I would not be here.
If Jordan was looking down right now, he would say to Steve and I, way to go, Mom and Dad. I'm so proud of you. I know he would.
Absolutely every day he drives me. Kyle, he's the force behind this. Because of the work that we have done and the other foundations have done, we have saved those two children and their families from going through what we have gone through.
Kaylee survived. Sebastian survived. But in order for that to happen, you had to have miracles line up perfectly. They had to get to the hospital very quickly. They had to get the treatment quickly. The drug had to be relatively near them and available quickly. It almost never happens that way.
It's like people forget about it and all that, but like if it happens to you, it stays with you for the rest of your life. Like, it's not a day I don't think about it.
It's changed my outlook on life, that don't take life for granted, because you can lose it just like that. Live it while you can.
Kaylee knows how precious life can be. Not long after she made a full recovery, her mother, Tracy, tragically lost her own battle with breast cancer.
Tracy had been battling breast cancer off and on since '05. And December 27th, 2014, she passed away from it.
When I got sick and when she was going through her battle with cancer, it was just the saying that me and Mom used, and to fight like a girl. I would figure if she would be here, she'd just tell me to push on with my dream. Make memories and hold on to them.
Why some people contract Naegleria fowleri, the brain-eating amoeba, while others don't, remains a mystery. What we do know is that children are more likely to be infected than adults. Also, in rare cases, the amoeba can be found in untreated tap water and unchlorinated pools. Through the efforts of the Kyle Lewis and Jordan Smelsky Foundations, the life-saving drug miltefosine is now available in 10 states and 20 hospitals. Thanks for joining us. I'm BD Wong. Good night.